Hello everyone, back here with Erkan and myself, Shulagh, for part 2 of our critical thinking conversation.
So, critical thinking, Shulagh, how's your thinking developed since we did part 1 around the subject?
Well, because we covered those 3 questions last week that I brought up. We had those 3 questions. Whenever you come across anything in the media, first of all, what do they want me to think about this? Why do they want me to think it? And what do I think now? And I kind of extended that because I think it's actually quite useful to touch base with yourself first of all, even before you start reading or watching anything. You know, what do I think about this headline or this subject? You know, what is my current knowledge situation? And then as a result, or during the time that you're engaging with that content, you can ask those questions. What do they want me to think? Why do they want me to think it? And then again, touch base with yourself at the end. What do I think now and why do I think it? You know, has my position changed? Because I've found, you know, the more challenging the information gets, the more complex and the more difficult the wording, which I might talk a little bit more about later, the more difficult the wording, the opinions can become really, really nuanced, and you can't just sum things up in like simple single words and sentences.
And I think in a world of sound bites and 18-minute TED Talks and give it to me in 4 points, there's a culture of reductionism and oversimplification, and I think that's the way a lot of our news comes to us. You know, it's da 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 bang, da 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 bang. It's like, you notice that it's statement after statement of what is on the outset makes it seem like a very simple, obvious kind of thing when you see it on the news or the mainstream. But when you start digging deeper, so people say, oh, 40,000 people have died from COVID-19. Yeah. I said, really? So where'd you get that information from? And they'll go, well, they said it on the news. And you go, oh, okay. So these are like headlines. There's a reason we have headlines, because people then can digest them and repeat them. And if you look at our education system, there's a lot of it is écoute et répéter. You know, it's like you learn verbatim and then you regurgitate, or you represent that information the way you was taught to learn it. But what we're not so good at, what I notice people, as soon as you say to them, okay, and then you present something back, they run out of runway very quickly. So I was thinking about that earlier. I was thinking, well, how do I go about it? Sorry, guys, everyone, I've had a cracked tooth, so if I sound like I'm slurring, it's not because I've had a couple of pints before the show. It's first of all, I think what it does, if you're going to start researching, in the way I think about it, is you've got to start building what you could term proxy sense makers. Like, who are your proxies? Where do you go? So something happens, and it was an interesting thing. You know, the black guy who pulled the white guy out of the right-wing riots last week, and everyone was praising the black guy for saving the white guy, and how amazing, look what's come out of this. And I'm like, First thing I do is I reserve any judgment. I really stay neutral. Like, I have no opinion. That's kind of what I notice as my first response. And then I kind of let it sink in a bit for me. And I think, well, it's interesting that the guy was wearing certain gloves. It's interesting that he's such a strong, big black bloke, you know, and it just seemed very, how can I put it to you? Like someone was rescuing a child. You know, when I saw the guy on the other guy's back and the guy was being brought out, it was like, he was very kind of just being saved. He was like, oh, being saved. And that's what occurred to me when I first saw it. And I thought to myself, it does look a bit staged. You know, the photography was just spot on, and you kind of have to ask yourself, it just starts to, you know, just let your sense of your sensibilities, or your own kind of hold on a minute, you know, just let that run before you start. It's like looking at the image with the sound off, you know, and then turn the sound up and see what narrative is being laid over it. So that's how I start on it, and then I'll say a bit more about it. So I don't know. So for example, on that situation, I don't know if you've done much on that one, Shulagh, but I mean, did you have any initial responses, say, to that particular story?
No, I mean, I'm very much like yourself. I tend to reserve judgment. I don't take things at face value anymore. So I tend not to formulate opinions straight away about stuff like that, or really attach any emotion to them. So because this is...
So it's a bit like you're observing it, with just like is observing it without the narrative, just watching what's happening in movement or perception, without all the not perception, but without all the narrative. That's the only way I can kind of explain it, and then you just experience it as it's happening.
Yeah, just watch the events unfold, because inevitably what happens with these sort of media presented scenarios, other little bits of information come out of the woodwork, and at that point, if you've already invested into a particular viewpoint, you then have to reevaluate and change. Whereas if you just, as you say, maintain that neutral perspective, then all that's happening is that you're just enlarging that perspective as the new information comes to light.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think there is this tendency, you tend to be very much like the sort of dog chasing the rabbit, almost, as all these little bits of information, there's something happening over here, there's something happening over here, and you go from one thing to the next. And whereas if you have that more grounded position, then you can kind of watch everything unfold. And I think you also start to see connections as well, which you might sometimes miss.
Yeah, it's almost like you've been drawn into a very focused, and also the imagery, the way imagery is used, the way film is used. You know, I think there was the thing where the guy had a stick recently in a bit of a brawl, and yet behind him there's something else going on, and behind him, but they focused in on and the narrative works on that point. I think there's other very good explanation. You know, like it's what story are you being sold, especially with the mainstream, to start with, because that's where it usually breaks out. You know, because they've got the resources to have reporters all over the place. They buy the photographers sell their photographs to those agencies, and then they prepare the narrative that goes with it. But then after that, I then go to my proxies. So it's like I've some over the years, I've built up a panel of proxy sense makers that I'd like to kind of hear what they've done with it as well. Like, just to see, you know, obviously now at this point you're probably starting to have an opinion. You can't help but start to create some view of it, or you start ask. What I find I do is I start to ask certain questions. Like, someone points something out, or I'll notice something, I think that's interesting. So why has that guy got these kind of, go back to the black guy pulled the white guy out, he had these kind of what you could call tactical protective gloves on that would look like semi paramilitary, or at least protective clothing of some sort. You know, would you go to a rally with that kind of clothing on? It just kind of just looks odd. It just sticks out in your mind. You just go and look at it and you think, well, why is he wearing that? You know, or something like that. You know, like there was did you see the guy with the umbrella, black umbrella, hammer? He was wearing like a snorkel kind of.
Yeah, that, you know,
and he was going around smashing windows in America. In I don't know where that was. And you kind of look at it and go, well, that's bloody obvious, isn't it? I mean, the guy's got a black umbrella, and he's got all covered up, and he's going around smashing windows. And you've got to ask yourself, that just doesn't, it just looks odd. I mean, that's very obvious, kind of odd. So they're the kind of things I'd like to pick up at the beginning. And then I also, what I recommend is, this is really hard for a lot of people, I find, is to self-qualify. Because what they say is, what do you know about cancer? Or what do you know about this? Or what do you know about that? And it's always a conspiracy with you, Erkan. And I'm like, well, I never say it's a conspiracy. I'm just looking at what there is to see. And I'm saying, does that look, I'm asking the question, you know? and I'm willing to lean into my own personal view of it, as opposed to they said it's XYZ, so therefore it must be XYZ. Because, and this is the way I was thinking about it, there's a if you look at how much millions of hours or minutes per day are created by the mainstream media, it's a massive wall of like there's a lot of water, there's a lot of pressure behind the dam. So when they put information out, there's a lot behind it. It isn't just coming out from one little trickle. It's coming out with the force of all that pressure behind it, all that mechanism. And by that I mean you've got radio, you've got newspapers, you've got magazines, you've got the social media, you've got the online newspapers, offline. You got, when they hit a narrative, it's coming from all angles in all ways. So to have so I'd just like to finish it. So to have the courage to question that, there's a lot of force coming against you. So you're kind of going against not only that, but also the majority of people will believe that. So to kind of go, stop, this force of, I like the metaphor of a river, or the dam is opening up its, and there's billions of gallons of water coming to you, and you're going to stand there and go, no, I don't agree. You just get completely, there's so much weight behind whatever the mainstream kick out, that to stop and say, I hold on, and you notice it in conversation with people, they go, yeah, but loads of people have died. And you go, have they? Of what? Oh, COVID. And you go, really? I was tested for COVID the other day, and I had COVID-19 tested. Did you? And so when we're going to be thinking critically and being a heretic, as you're saying, with all that weight, with all that colloquial understanding and kind of casual conversations as well, you are against that level of force. Not against it, but you're questioning it. It's not like you're going, everything that comes out, I'm no. But you're saying, hold on a minute, that's what's coming. It's like a train coming at you, and you're going to try and stop that with everything that comes with it, and all the passengers and all the smoke and everything that comes with it. So that's the thing when I was thinking about earlier on today, I was thinking, God, that's a lot to put yourself against. And it could just be easier to go, do you know what, I'll just go along with it.
Totally agree. I think people do underestimate the huge budgets and the manpower that is behind getting this information out and disseminated across all the various channels. And questions are sort of very powerful things to use when you're trying to sort out fact from fiction. And I think also just being aware of how, who is actually guiding your thoughts and how they're actually being steered in particular directions, because the media will, and one thing I've noticed more and more lately, which I hadn't noticed so much before, but particularly with, I think it's the BBC, the use of dramatic language, whereas news reporting to me was always supposed to be just about that, the news, just the reporting of events, and what you would hope would be facts, things that had actually happened. But the way they've been using this descriptive, dramatic language to, bring in the shock factor, or, portray a specific event in a much worse light than it might actually have been.
They're using almost every trick in the book. I mean, if you can't see that COVID-19 is a massive psyop, well, consider you're part of the effect of it. And even when it first started, I mean, nobody could help but feel, I heard seasoned researchers saying, lock yourself at home, be cautious, because we didn't know. At that stage, you'd be stupid to just go, I'm going to do what I want. Although I felt that way from the beginning, I'll be honest, but there's still that wave of sentiment and views about it, and also it's in your own household. Could be your wife or your kids or your husband or your people, your friends or your parents, and it does make you second guess. You know, so that force, I'll call it force of culture, and to go against that tide is a major thing. Now, things if you're going to step out and start getting, you know, start to critically think and question what is going on, you're going to have to invest. And I think this is the thing that most people don't do, right? So when people say to me, "Oh, COVID," I said, "Well, you do," and I suddenly realised how much depth of understanding I have. And it's not like an ego trip. It's just, that's the fact. I've done a lot of research because I'll talk about Neil Ferguson, Imperial College, the funding that Bill Gates has put. And before you know it, they're going, you know, lost. So what I'm noticing is if I'm going to start, and I think I mentioned this on the call earlier on today, is if you're going to start engaging someone, engage them at the level they're at, not the level you're at. Because it's like going into a karate dojo or something, and you're the black belt, and a little kid of 8 years old walks in with a white belt, and you just go, ha, ha, sure, and they just look at you, and they're just like, they haven't got, really, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? We're not doing ourselves any favours, and I've done plenty of that, so I know what that's like. But I think it's kind of meeting people where they're at, but not dumbing it down either. Like, so I'll say to them, have you heard of Imperial College? No. Do you know who Neil Ferguson is? No. Okay. So you know at the beginning when we was told it would be 550,000 people are going to die of this. Oh, yeah, I remember that. Okay, well, the guy who made those figures is Neil Ferguson, and he works at Imperial College, and they are funded by Bill and Melinda Gates. Oh, are they? Yes. What do you make of that? Well, they just want us to have vaccines, don't they? Yes, they do, don't they? I know it sounds so patronising. I know it does.
I get where you're coming from, though.
But you're not having a conversation with an equal. And I think, I don't mean as you know, they're not equally, you know, human, but you're not on an equal footing. So instead of kind of you're coming from here and they're there, instead of hitting them from there, boom, 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 is actually bring yourself to a point where they can get you, and then just, you know, if you've got them that far, you've done really well. Because usually you go from here, go boom, 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 and they go, oh, what a load of rubbish, that conspiracy theorist. Or that Erkan, or that Shulagh, she's always bloody nutter, she is. Oh yeah, she's a nutter. And then we go, no, they're all idiots. And then we don't, and then we feel kind of like, what you got to do? What you got to do to get through these people? Well, just meet them at the level they're at, but you've got to get good at how you have that conversation and encourage them, because the work it takes a lot of work and time. And then the other thing I put in here is it takes experience, because there are disinformation agents, there are people that are out there that have got all sorts of agendas. So it's not easy to walk into that and work out who is giving you good information, who isn't. So when you start to think about these proxy sense makers, because you're not there at the time it happens, so you've got to rely on, you know, a network of people collating information. And if you're going to step away from the mainstream, there's a lot more responsibility, there's a lot more effort, and you're probably going to get it wrong a bit before you start to get a sense of it. So it's very easy to retract back to the mainstream because it's easier, it's less embarrassing.
It's more done for you.
And there's that force, that continuity that the mainstream has. Yeah. And the things I think also, when you start getting outside of the mainstream, you start to notice how people talk, and you go back to the mainstream, you see how wired up it is. You know, like you said, the angles and the drama they spin on it, you know?
Yeah. What I'd like to add in there is talking about, like, I guess, kind of where you said, like, lower the level that we engage with people. At the same time, I think it's important that we upgrade our own skills, because certainly what I've realised from this is that in order to engage with, like, the primary source, and by that I mean like the actual go-to information, whether it's, you know, legal documents or scientific journals, all these websites which are just littered with really, really complicated language, we have to get used to that, and we have to be able to cut through it to, first of all, extract what the meaning is, and then to be able to put it into our own words to explain it at the level of these people that we talk to. So kind of two jobs in one there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think also it's like if you're becoming I think we underestimate how far we've come in exploring off mainstream. And it's like anything. If you're into anything, whether it's cars or fishing, there's a certain understanding with people who are into that. And if someone came and talked to me about fishing equipment at the level of people who fish regularly, I'd be like, one, I'm not really that interested, and two, what? Why would I care? You know. So there's a way of communicating where you're talking to people where they're at in terms of their interest. And again, we don't stop to think that we don't, as a collective, if you like, truthers or researchers or however you want to, or just, you know, moral, good, well, you know, good meaning, well, you know, people that want to have a good grip on what's going on around them. We have a responsibility to craft our ability to communicate those ideas to people at the level they're at. And I think that is, you know, in all these years, I'm still learning, because every now and again, I'm just diving in and I'm like, oh, I'm doing it again. So
yeah, we can start name dropping like we've known these people forever. You know, whether you're talking about Soros or Q or whoever, you kind of almost expect people to sort of fall in line with that.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I ask people now is that sales is, you know, a very important part of sales is selling an idea. You know, you don't actually buy the thing you're buying at the time. You're usually buying the idea of it. And the idea is to work out, first part of sales is qualifying people where they're at. You know, so, you know, in sales you'd say, so when are you looking to buy? What's your budget? What do you want, you know, what do you want it to do for you? What do you think it should do for you? Why don't you want the other one? You know, you're working, you know, you're doing your Columbo stage. No, we don't do that. We just dive straight in and bombard them with blah, 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 with what we heard on UK Column or wherever, and just hit them with it, and they go, and they're lost, right? So, and I'm starting to ask a few questions up front. It's like, well, have you heard of Neil Ferguson? Okay, no. Have you heard of Imperial College? No. Have you heard of Agenda 21? No. Okay, Agenda 30? No. And then you kind of go, okay, fine. Heard of Bill Gates? Okay, great. Okay, so but you're starting to get what do you make of Bill Gates? Oh, he's a really nice guy. He's very clever. Runs big, you know, Microsoft. Okay, good. Okay, cool. And then slowly say, well, you might want to, you know. Or I asked them, what do you want out of this conversation? I just want to chat. So you not really committed to anything. Do you want like? See, people will defend the mainstream and they don't know they're defending it. But what are they committed to in the conversation? And if they're not committed to anything, I'll go, well, I'm going to leave it here then, because it's again, think of yourself as the black belt, and now you're taking on a white belt 8-year-old, and you're engaging them, and you don't even know what the little boy wants out of this. That sounds a little bit weird, but I promise you it will help. And then you choose who you engage with, and at what level, to what end. And I think that's better for everyone. It's better because if they're not interested, or they're going to just rebut you on everything you say, well, fine, it's fine. I don't need to keep going now.
Yeah, there's definitely a skill. You know, conversations are two-way things at the end of the day. And if someone is definitely not investing in any kind of fair exchange of views and opinions, or is too attached to a particular outcome, then you're kind of on a road to nowhere.
And I think what I'm finding, and I guess this is about a path of critical thinking, is finding the bits we agree on with people quickly before it gets too. Because I always have a context that says we're on the same side. You know, now if every ordinary person you meet, we're all on the same side. None of those people are your enemy. You know, and I think there was something on UK Column today about one of the reporters saying I was engaged as an enemy, not as a, you know, someone that was looking to swap ideas and share straight away an enemy. So you can't really conversate in that environment or in those conditions. And I think if we're going to do the critical thinking and we want to digest it and be able to bring it to more people, we have to up our game, because they're not going to up their game to be able to work out that, what you're saying is true, unless they're committed to it.
Yeah, it's kind of, I found as well, differentiating between a primary and a secondary source of information. I think that's crucial.
How would you distinguish both of those?
Well, primary source is like an actual document, or, you know, a person who actually said the thing. And then the secondary source is like your UK column, or the person who's reporting what was said. And I know we rely a lot on these secondary sources, like articles and things like that, things we read, things that we see, and I've been just as guilty of that. But it's always worth following the links and, you know, just literally going as far as you can along that chain to get to the actual source of the information, because quite often you find out a lot more stuff along the way.
But that again, that takes some commitment, doesn't it? You know,
it does. It takes time. It takes effort. And, yeah. But I think with the climate as it is at the moment, you can't take anything for granted when it comes to sort of research and, you know, what you take on board as being a fact.
Yeah, I want to come back to that, because once, and this is the bit I said about self-qualifying, because at some point, if you're just doing the mainstream regurgitate, you know, écouter, répéter, you know, take it in and then repeat it, that's kind of, you know, unless I sound quite condescending, but it's like parrot fashion. It's like you're just repeating what you've heard. Now, what I want to encourage people to do is speak at the level of, this is where I'm at with it. Start putting yourself on the record, you know, rather than this is, you know, just repeating what you've heard in the news, or even truthers, just repeating what you've been told, is actually referencing those preferably primary sources, but also, because the good thing about primary, it is still open to interpretation, but it's still, everyone can still reference the same thing, whatever document that is, or the actual doctor's
interview, or
yeah. But with secondary, there is a certain level of, like that proxy sense making, there's a certain level of, well, this is what we've made of it, and they're sharing that. But I think at the level of self-qualifying and being sovereign, I think critical thinking requires that you own what you think. Now, we said there's 3 caveats, didn't we? We said from the beginning. You have the right to get it wrong, right to change your mind, and empathy for yourself and others. So, you know, you don't have to be, once you've kind of got a view on a subject, that I'm standing on that view no matter what. But you can preface it, well, the way I see it is, or my opinion of this is, or the way it looks to me at this stage is like this, rather than that's what's happened, bang. Because that's the other thing I noticed with, not just with truthers, but everybody, is like, oh, don't, that's it. I've worked that out now. That's the way it is. Not moving from there. And you can kind of, you know, what they call it, push yourself into a corner, and then you can't move. You can't go, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I had that. Yeah, I got that wrong. I got that. Well, new information, or, you know, second view of that, third view, or I heard from, I kind of see. Yeah, but do you remember the was it Anderson, the police officer that was doing his to-camera piece for America? Police officer, all blacked out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, he wasn't even a police officer at the time, and he'd left the police 2 years before. But when that came out, I was like, wow, at last the people, you know, you react to it. You can't preempt everything coming at you. And then 3 weeks or 2 weeks later, there's this thing, he wasn't even in the police force at the time. He'd left the police.
Yeah, and he'd racked up however much it was in donations. And
so he just basically, then, to me, that was like dirty in the water for another, you know, police officer to come in and start saying what's going on in the background. You know, so I usually share things and say, what do you make of this? What do you see here? What have you noticed about that? You know, and if people ask me personally, I will give them my view, but I would rather people think for themselves, you know, and they don't have to agree with Shulagh or Erkan. They can work it out for themselves, and that's it. That's where they're at. It's fine.
Yeah, and personally, I love having conversations about this kind of stuff and finding out from people who do think differently, because it helps me to refine my own thinking, my own process.
Yeah, I think the other
And
thing I
that's
love about,
what I enjoy.
you broke up a bit there, but the other thing I love about being part of Beyond Mainstream is people will share stuff and if, oh, I haven't seen that before. You know, someone just shared an author or something, and I'm like, oh, that's another avenue to if you're having some internet problems, another avenue to explore and how it can shed light on the subject. But all of the critical thinking aside, I mean, this is a really important thing before we start closing off, is what are you going to do with the information? Because there are a lot of people out there just having a you know, like an academic obstacle course, you know, or they'll argue one way or argue another, whichever side of the fence. But then how is that going to make things different? How are you improving? How you know, what are you going to do with that information? I think that's really, maybe it's something for us to talk about on another call. But I think that's the thing I would start asking, because you can accumulate all the information. Then what? And that's why we're doing these videos, right? We're accumulating information, but we want to share the ideas and engage people and get them thinking about different areas and different aspects of working out what's going on. But ultimately, we want to make a difference.
Yeah, because once you know this stuff, I think you do have a certain responsibility to act, but it's the taking action, you know, that's where the real magic lies. You know, that's what changes things. And if you're just churning all this stuff over and over without actually doing anything about it, then
it's just academic exercise. We
just drown in information, and
like I said, like an opinion. It's like an opinion fest. You know, it's like belly buttons. Everyone's got one, but now what? You know, and I think that's the thing that, and I can see why it's daunting for people. You know, what do you do? Where do you start? You know, and again, we won't get into that now, but I don't have all the answers on that. But there are loads of things you can do, and I think we'll leave that for the next call. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, there was one last thing that I wanted to throw into the mix, and that is that what isn't said is just as important, if not more important, than what is said. You mentioned Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 earlier, and I think like those documents are key examples of that in action. I was going to do a little bit of an article on that at some point, because like learning to read between the lines and interpret those documents again is another skill, because there's all this kind of fluffy, feel-good utopian language that makes it all sound really, really wonderful, but when you get into the nuts and bolts of what they actually mean by it, it's a whole different kettle of fish.
It's like sustainable development. I mean, it sounds fantastic, but people have no idea what it's doing to town centres, what it's doing to our countryside, what it's doing to, I mean, all sorts of things. And I'll be honest with you, it is a very dense subject area. You know, so it would take anybody a long time to start working out what does that mean to me at the local level where I live. And you can see sustainable development all over the place.
You know, I've had conversations where, you know, someone's read those basic sustainable development goals and said, well, what's wrong with that? It sounds fabulous. And so then you have to start backing up what it is you're actually saying and find, you know, real concrete references for why you think what you think and why this sustainable development is such a bad idea.
Yeah,
and that was when I realised that I needed to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that was when the penny dropped for me on that.
Yeah, and I think also you start to realise how, and this is where I think where people kind of get, I think there's something quite intimidating about a conspiracy theory, because if you don't know what's happening, then you hear it, then it's, oh, hold on, I mean, it's just a theory, because they haven't done the work, they don't know, right? But some of it's very uncomfortable. It makes a very uncomfortable ideas of what the authorities or the powers that are controlling our planet, what their agendas are, you know, in almost any area. in almost any area. You know, like just this agenda to lose cash right now. I was talking to someone earlier on today. You know, and we had a call earlier on, didn't we, where someone was saying, you know, crypto, and I'm like, well, I don't trust it. I don't trust it, because once it's on the internet, you know, once we're all being driven towards digital, then, you know, if someone wants to switch off my ability to buy food, I can't do anything about it. But if I've got intrinsic value products and items or proper money, then I'm more independent. I'm freer, and I think there's a lot of thinking to do here, and maybe there's dialogue and conversations are required to help people develop their thinking. And they're trying to convince you, no, it's blockchain. No one actually owns it. Yeah, but who? If some, okay, very unlikely. But what if the internet got shut down? And they go, well, that ain't going to happen. Oh, isn't it going to happen? Well, look what they just did in the last 3 months. They shut down the global economy like that.
Yeah, we do have to prepare ourselves for all eventualities. And if you invest just in one thing, one solution, and then 2 months later the rug gets pulled out from under you, then you're in trouble.
Okay,
that's where I think the exploration is really important.
I haven't got anything else to add today.
Okay, cool.
I mean, probably could go on for hours, but I think we should.
I'm sure we could.
Well, thank you, Shulagh. It's great to see you. And
you too.
You're settling in okay in the new place?
Yes, enjoying my very rustic surroundings, and the sun's outside, and there are cows next door and sheep up the road. And
I don't want to hear about the odd sheep game missing, and suddenly you're getting doing a lot of barbecuing. Anyway, listen, it's been fantastic.
And my lettuces have started germinating as well. So
you said that, yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's
brilliant.
all
That's
good.
a whole new adventure. So, so to say to everybody, thank you for tuning in today. This is part 2 of our critical thinking session with Shulagh Jacobs and myself, Erkan Ali, at the Beyond Mainstream Red Pill Zone. Please subscribe to our channel. It's new. This is our 6th video. I got it wrong last time. I think this is our 6th video, and we are going to be inviting other guests to the show at some point, and we're going to be developing. If there's any subjects you'd like us to explore, please let us know. And anything else for you, Shulagh?
No, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. See you again on the next call. Thank you, Erkan. It's been a pleasure, as always.
Oh, nice. See ya. Bye.